Hello and welcome to Something Wicked. My name is Baz and today I'm going to be making this horrible little thing. It comes from a medieval painting called the Visions of Tondal that's based upon one of the most disturbing stories I've ever read. Created by a follower of Hieronymus Bosch, the painting tells the tale of a sinful Irish knight who is dragged from the world of the living to face the horrors awaiting him in hell. Now, just a quick heads up, this episode does contain some pretty graphic descriptions of torture and mutilation, so only proceed if you want to go to hell. So to get us started, we're going to build this guy a skeleton. I'm going to make the left and right hand side of his body first, and then a kind of spine-like section that stretches from the end of his hooter to the tip of his tail. Once I have those three pieces, I'll tape everything together before wrapping it in wire to make it nice and sturdy. So once the armature's done, I will lock him in place and then I'll start packing him out with tin foil. Once he's bulked out with that, I'm going to start adding a layer of medium density super sculpting, which I'll smooth out using my thumbs and a range of different tools to add texture to his skin. Now, the painting this little demon is from was inspired by a 12th century Irish legend called the Visions of Tondal. This was a very popular story at the time, and it inspired a ton of medieval and Renaissance art. For example, in 1474, a very swanky edition of the story was commissioned by Margaret of York, Duchess of Burgundy. It features 20 incredible illuminations by the artist Simon Marmion. And now, thanks to the Getty Museum for making this stuff freely available, you can enjoy and endure some of those beautiful illuminations while I tell you the twisted tale of Tondal. Our story begins in 12th century Ireland with a lusty, greedy glutton of a knight called Tondal. One evening, in the middle of a banquet, he drops down dead. As his soul rises, an angel towers above him. It tells him that he has wasted his life and now must see where his choices have led. Darkness gives way to fire. A vast valley stretches out, echoing with the screams of the damned. Here, murderers suffer endlessly, their bodies roasted on an iron slab, their flesh burning until it melts away, only for their bodies to be remade so the torment can start over. Tondal tries to run away, but the angel seizes him, dragging him higher to a mountain that burns on one side and freezes on the other. The souls of heretics are dragged back and forth between the two extremes by demons with hooked chains. Beyond that cursed place is another valley, another punishment, where the proud and arrogant are forced to cross a narrow, crumbling bridge. One by one, the terrified souls slip, their screams vanishing as they plunge into the black abyss below. In the distance, something massive stirs in the rumbling dark. It is the colossal beast Acheron, its mouth stretched impossibly wide with two demons holding it open. Inside, the souls of the greedy are consumed over and over again, their agonized screams swallowed up by the flames. He tries to run, but the angel's grip tightens. Tondal is a greedy man, and he must taste the agonizing consequence of his sin. Before he can protest, he is dragged forward and cast into the creature's gaping mouth. Bloody hell, that was intense, wasn't it? Anyway, back to Monsieur Fruiteltoot. I'm going to bind together his toe bones with 2-part epoxy putty, and once I've shaped up his toes, I'll cover his feet in clay. Once his feet are looking alright, I can start working on his schnozzle. Now, the schnozzle is obviously the main event of this little build, so I'm going to spend quite a lot of time on it to make it look just right. I have no idea what this scrap of metal is, but it's perfect for the tip of his hooter. I'll attach it using 2-part epoxy putty, then some oven-baked clay adhesive to help the clay bind to the surface. Now, you can't actually see his mouth in the original image, but I think this guy is a cyclostome. Cyclostomes are jawless creatures like lampreys and hagfish. They have a round mouth for sucking and feeding, and instead of jaws, they have a toothy oral disc called a buccal funnel, lined with horrible little teeth that help them latch onto prey. Now, lampreys use them to rasp away at flesh, hagfish use them to burrow into carcasses, and this little guy, well, he just sucks sins straight from the screaming faces of the damned.
Slowly but surely the demon emerges. Cast a shadow on your safe oasis. Cast a shadow on your safe oasis. Cast a shadow on your safe oasis. Slowly but surely the demon emerges.
So I'm going to be using these solid black glass eyes that were a recommendation from YouTuber Dan Does. Big shout out to you, Dan. And don't they look precious in the face of this adorable little bastard? Once they're done, I'm going to give him a couple of ears, pop those onto the sides of his head, and then we can dig a little bit deeper into his schnozzle. I want our little guy to be able to play some very particular notes on his schnozzle. Specifically, I want him to play a tritone, an unsettling interval that occurs between the 4th and 7th degrees of the major scale. Now, this interval is famously known as the Devil's Interval, and back in medieval times it was considered so dissonant and unsettling that it was dubbed Diabolus in Musica, Latin for the devil in music. Now, Fruitletoot's nose looks a bit like a long medieval trumpet called a beastie, but the artist also painted holes, which suggest that it is in fact a shawm. Shawms use 2 reeds to make a sound, and I reckon this guy's got a pair of fleshy flaps hidden up his nostrils that work just like a double reed. His hooter is 10.94 centimetres long, that would sound like a G6. The 4th above that is C7, which would be 27mm from his nostrils, and to finish off the Devil's Interval we'll need an F-sharp 7-hole 51mm along his schnozzle. I spent bloody ages on this guy's ratty little hands, giving them bones and tendons that jut out everywhere. But once I'm happy with those, I'll smooth out the surface of the clay using isopropyl alcohol. Once his hands are looking ship-shape and Bristol fashion, I can turn my attention to his tail. First, I'll dock the end off it, then I'll drill a hole so I can glue a thinner gauge wire into the tip. Once that's glued in place, I'll wrap some wire around it to give the clay something to bind to, and after adding a few more finishing touches, it's time for me to tell you how you can get your very own Monsieur Fruitletoot. So I've spent the last few weeks designing a limited edition Fruitletoot plushie. He just arrived today. He is freaking amazing. He's got a long schnozzle, puffy little cheeks, adorable little cloak, lovable buccal funnel. He's even got a little bum hole. So this guy is limited edition. He's only on sale until the 17th of August, and after that, he'll be gone forever. But here's the catch. I need to pre-sell 300 of these little fellas before he can go into production, and I've only got 3 weeks to do that. So let's get this adorable little lump of evil out into the world. Pause the video, click the link in the pinned comment, and get yourself something wicked today. Thank you for supporting this chaos. Now, back to the horror. Tondal screams as the beast's jaws snap shut. Inside, the heat is blinding. Flesh melts, bones twist and fuse. And then, without warning, the creature heaves and vomits him out. He staggers upright. The angel stands resolute before him. Ahead of them a bridge, blade thin and studded with sharp iron nails. below the bridge a boiling lake swarming with demons torturing the souls of thieves. The angel tells Tondal that he must cross the bridge with a cow that he once stole as penance for that crime. Tondal protests, but there is no way back. With every step, the nails tear into his feet. At last he reaches the other side, but his torments are far from over. As a soul steeped in sin, Tondal must taste each punishment he witnesses. First, he is thrown into an oven as large as a mountain where gluttons and fornicators are burned and mutilated. Next, he is consumed by a beast that eats unchaste priests and nuns, before excreting them onto a frozen lake pregnant with serpents that consume them from within. From there, he is cast into the forge of Vulcan, where the wicked are beaten on a burning anvil, their bodies forged together into one solid mass. At last he reaches the gates of hell, where he beholds Lucifer. Vast, unspeakable, crushing souls like grapes with his 10,000 hands. Among the damned, Tondal recognises many of his friends and family. He falls to his knees, begging for deliverance. The angel turns to him. Now you have seen the tribulations of the damned. From this point forward you will see the glory and the light of God. So now it's time to give this adorable little demon a cloak, or to be more specific, a pelerine, a small cape-like garment that covers the shoulders. So I'm going to use paper to map that out, stabbing needles into him like a deranged tailor, but that will hold the paper in place for long enough to make sketching out the edge of the pelerine a lot easier. I have an excellent selection of fabric swatches to choose from. Once I find the right one, I'm going to use it to print that texture onto a thin sheet of clay. Talcum powder will be used to stop the clay and cloth sticking to one another, and then we'll put the whole thing through my trusty pasta roller. I'm sure you'll agree that the results are pretty bloody satisfying. I'll blast the clay for exactly 5 seconds with my heat gun. That will cure the surface so there's less chance of me smudging it. I'm then going to use the paper patterns we made earlier to cut out the shapes of the pelerine, and once I've binned the excess, it's time for his costume fitting. I'm going to be using medium density super sculpting for the thread, rolling it out into a long thin noodle before cutting off a section to serve as the first stitch. From there I can start the painstaking process of sewing him up at the back, compressing 2 hours of work into a nice little time lapse. For the thread at the front, I'm going to be using some thin aluminium wire which I'll tie into a bow before fastening it in place. Then I can make a start on his belt. A little bit of baby powder will stop this noodle of clay from sticking to the crafting board as I roll it, and then a generous slopping of bacon bomb will hold it in place. I want to add plenty of detail to the belt, so to get us started I'm going to craft a buckle out of some thick aluminium wire. Once I've shaped up the buckle with my cheap ass rotary tool, I'll belt on a few more belty bits to his belt before moving on to his dagger. I'm going to use some wire to get the blade started, and then I'll fix in place the crossguard using some super glue and baking powder before packing the whole thing out with clay. Once I've shaped up the blade, I'll wrap some very thin copper wire around the hilt to provide the grip, and then I'll fasten the whole thing in place with a thin strip of clay. With the first draft of this guy's dagger in place, I'm going to start making some eyelets for his belt, which no one's ever going to notice, but we'll know they're there. And then I can start roughing up the edges of his pelerine to give him a more weathered look. For the pièce de résistance, I'll craft him a little sack for the back of his belt, probably containing body parts he's lovingly harvested from his victims. I'm going to add a few more details to his face, using cling film to soften the marks of my sculpting tools, and once he's looking adorable, it's time to add some pre-baked talons to his feet. A little spritz of isopropyl alcohol will help these noodly veins stick to the backs of his hands. Then I can try a new nail making technique that I've picked up. First, you add some Vaseline to a rounded stick before applying a thin layer of UV resin. The Vaseline stops the resin sticking so that you can peel off a thin rounded sheet that can be shaped up, ready to add to the tips of his fingers. And with all the details in place, that concludes the sculpting phase of the build. So I'm going to pop this guy in the oven while you click the subscribe button, and then we can rejoin Tondal for the last leg of his journey. Suddenly, Tondal was surrounded by white light, cool air, a world far from hell. The angel shows him a wall where the souls of the bad, but not very bad, stand in niches. They're exposed to the wind and rain, but no other punishment. Next, he sees a lush green field where the good, but not very good, sit by a fountain surrounded by flowers and trees. A little further on, he sees a hidden pavilion with beautiful music drifting out. Within it, nuns and monks sit with angels in the presence of the Holy Trinity. From there, he is led to a silver wall where the faithfully married sing praises to God, and then a golden wall reserved for martyrs who sit upon sumptuous thrones. Finally, the angel leads him to a wall shimmering as if aflame with countless jewels. And there, in that moment, Tondal felt the glory and light of God. Tondal turned to the angel. "Please, dear master, I pray you that I could stay here forever." But it was not to be. Suddenly, his soul was yanked back into his body. He woke up, gasping, drenched in sweat, and without hesitation confessed to all of his sins, gave away his wealth, and exhorted everyone he met from that day forth to lead good and honest lives. The story of Tondal redefined hell within the common imagination of medieval Europe. It would go on to inspire great literary works like Dante's Inferno, but also great artists like Hieronymus Bosch, whose students loved it. At the front of this amazing painting based on the Visions, we find Tondal, sitting naked on a giant dice symbolising his covetousness and greed. Beside him, Fruteltut, happily parping on his schnozzle while a duck in a cloak calmly stabs Tondal in the ribs. And if that doesn't keep you on the straight and narrow, I don't know what will. So now it's time to start painting him. First up, we're going to be using mummy robes for the creamy bits, monster brown, fur brown and leather brown for the furry bits, and a nice thick coat of army green for the pelerine. Now normally I'd whip out the airbrush for this sort of thing, but it's a bit fiddly, so I'm starting off with a good old-fashioned paintbrush. Once the base coat's on, I'll darken up the hands and feet with one of the browns I mentioned earlier, working the paint into all the various nooks and crannies. Once I've painted his belt and bag in leather brown, I'll spend a bit of time jazzing up his dagger and painting his pelerine. Now this is an electrostatic flocking applicator. It scatters tiny fibres onto the surface using an electrostatic charge to keep them erect. Plus it does this if you ignore the instructions. Shit. I'm using this ultra-fine white synthetic flock for his fur. It'll go straight into the tub on the flocking applicator. To hold the flock in place, I'm going to be using Prozaid, which is absolutely perfect for this job. Once his eggy little body is covered, I'll give him a thorough dusting with the flocking applicator. Now, if you're having a go at this, wear a respirator. This stuff gets everywhere and you do not want to be breathing it in. So with the basic flocking in place, I'm going to add some hair to his head using a bit of goat pelt and a process known as fur transfer, for which we'll need some clippers and some masking tape. At this point in the process, the fur is just about being held together by the masking tape, so we're going to add some Pros-Aid to an airbrush to fix it in place. In the end, it required about 7 layers of Pros-Aid to make the hair strong enough to prise away from the masking tape. But once I've done that, I could create workable chunks of hair that I could stick onto the top of his bonce. I'm going to use some Pros-Aid for that purpose. Then I'll do a bit more flocking just to blend everything in, give him a trim, and then I can give him some hairy hands. I'll use some fur brown paint to blend everything in. Once that's done, I will sharpen up the threading on his pelerine. I'll give him a little pedicure, and then I'll move on to his gob. So I'm going to cover all of his teeth in liquid mask. That's going to make it a hell of a lot easier for me to paint the inside of his mouth. Once the paint has dried, I'll give it a once over with a dark tone wash, remove the liquid mask, and then I'll brush up his teeth. I'm going to use some gloss varnish to make the inside of his gob glisten and gleam. And then some UV resin to give this hungry little demon some spittle. Once that's done, I can get cracking on the base. I'm going to glue some XPS foam to a wooden block and then use an electric foam cutter to shape things up. I'll then start pummeling the foam with a rock to impress that texture on it and apply some thick dollops of polyfiller to the base, which I'll stipple with a paintbrush. I'm going to give the whole thing a solid black base coat with my airbrush, being sure to get into all the nooks and crannies before creating a filthy little mud mix with dried up soil, paint and PVA glue. Now, I'm going to all this effort with the base because I want this to be a display piece, and that's because I'm giving this cursed creation away to one of my wonderful patrons. Without them, these videos don't happen, so this is a special thank you from me to them for choosing to support me. Stick around till the end to find out who's going to get this guy, and remember, if you want your very own Fruital Toot, check out my shop and get yourself something wicked today. Anyway, without further ado, it's time for the money shots. Thank you very much indeed for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I also want to say thank you very, very much indeed to my wonderful patrons. You guys are the absolute best. Without you, these videos would not get made. So to say thank you, I'm going to be giving away Fruital Toot to one of you. And without further ado, let's find out who that's going to be. So I'm using the spinny thing from a website called wheelofnames.com. It's a very good website. And it goes to Tenacious T. Absolutely love you. Thank you so much. Hope you like this little guy. I also used the spinny thing to select a few other supporters. Congratulations, Jake Gemino, Lash House, Michael Hetman, Adam D. Zolkova, and Salty Cupcake. You're all going to be getting a Something Wicked hat. Stay wicked, everyone. Bye-bye.
Roar.